Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we need.
Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman. Welcome to the 60th, number 60, Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We have a ton to talk about. We also have a wonderful distinguished author with us, BRYNN TANNEHILL, who will be with us later on. We got to talk about California, really big deal in California and in New York. We have Steve ROSENFELD is with us, going to fill us in on the latest with Ray LUTZ on Arizona, and a lot of news on the marches coming up in Washington. We're going to talk about that in the second hour. There are a lot of logistical things that we want to discuss. We want your opinions, so we have to make a decision about dealing with the COVID on these big events that we've been scheduling in DC. Also, Hetty Tripp is going to get a couple minutes for us from St. Cloud, Minnesota, where it's still snowing, right, Hetty? Is it snowing up there? Not yet. Okay. So at any rate, I want to welcome our listeners at the Progressive Radio Network, the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. It's great to have you with us. This show does air at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursdays, but it's only for an hour, and these calls go an hour and a half. So if you get to the top of the hour and we disappear, go to the Election Protection 2024.org website, get the link, and join us for the second hour. And that's always fun. So it's really I'm glad to have everybody with us here. We got 51 people on the call, and the great, wonderful group of people. And it's really an honor to have you all. So we're going to start with, I've got my California Love Trump's Hate, and we have a unique, this is really a unique situation in California, and we also have a unique situation with the governor in New York. I bet my son-in-law about 6 months ago that Cuomo would leave, Cuomo would be gone, and Newsom would not be. But let's see what's going to happen. TATANKA, you're in California. I see we're joined by JOHN BRAKEY. So we have our full Arizona crew with us, and we will get into Arizona with Ray LUTZ, Steve ROSENFELD, and JOHN BRAKEY. But we do want to start with California, New York, Arizona, and then we'll go to BRYNN TANNEHILL with her marvelous book, with a great cover, by the way, American. It disappeared. Oh, there we go. American Fascism, and is really like a compendium of our cause. She really covers the territory on stolen elections and what we're facing here in this country. I also will have a piece up at Reader Supported News about exactly why this is all happening, and we'll discuss that when we discuss BRYNN's book with her. So and then we got Charles Moreland and Joel Sega with us. We're going to discuss these events in DC in terms of the upcoming roundtable and things like that. So before we jump in, Jed, you had a quick one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harvey. I'll make this real quick. I'm trying to decide whether to go to DC for the August 28th thing or not. I'm doing some helping with some organizing work that goes until the 21st or 22nd. If I go, it'll be the 25th or thereabouts. But I need to get information on what kind of organizing opportunities and spots that I could fill. So if anyone can put something in the chat or PM or DM me, I'll send everybody my email. Be careful with it, and let me know how I can get involved in helping out in DC for the 28th.
We're going to have that discussion at the top of the hour or a little after. Charles Moreland and Joel Sega and I met just before this meeting. There are very significant logistical challenges. We will have, at very least, we will have major Zoom events that week. We have to discuss whether or not we want to do them in person. And so we will, but I don't want to get that into the first hour. We want to deal with our substantive issues in the first hour, and then we'll talk about the logistics of those events in DC in the second hour. Okay, Jed? So stick with us. You're a mainstay. And we want everybody's feedback on this. I mean, the question is, do we go ahead and do in-person events given what's going on with the COVID? And we'll make that decision this week, but we want to hear from you all. So that'll be in the second part of the second half of the discussion. Hetty, I don't want to lose track of you. Do you want to come in with your 2 minutes of fame here, Hetty Tripp? I don't want to interrupt your dinner.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Just, all right.
Go to Tatanka. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Hetty Tripp. I am calling from St. Cloud, Minnesota, but actually I wanted to refer to last week's speaker, Maureen Taylor. She was just so impressed hearing that she kind of went on a tangent. So I just wanted to record what was happening in Detroit, Michigan. So Maureen is part of the National Welfare Rights Union and also of the General Bakers Institute. So it's Detroit, Michigan. She's also on the executive board of the Poor People's Campaign. And so she took part, the Detroit folks took part in the Women's Moral Monday March in Washington, D.C., and that was July 19th. That was the anniversary of the Women's Convention at Seneca Falls. So this is part of the Poor People's Campaign. They did it in front of the U.S. court, and one of their platforms is to speak out against the destruction of the right to vote and fully restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So that's where we align with this group. 250 women came, all races, ages, sizes, clergy, lawyers, etc. 77 were arrested, and they posted bail for $50 each. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll post links to where people can look at what happened there, any kind of footage or any posters or connections, put it in the link. That would be great. Okay, thank you, Hetty. Much appreciated. That was a very good report. I'm glad to get it. Okay. Okay, let's go to California. I am in Southern California right now. It's hot as hell here. And, I did say a four-letter word, but that one's admissible. So, Tatanka, can you give us a report, please? Then we're going to go to New York and Arizona. But this is serious stuff. Will you tell us, please, what's happening with the recall on Governor Gavin Newsom?
Thank you, Harvey. So I'm a pretty political person. Last Wednesday on our Circle of 100 call with the Romero Institute working on the California Green New Deal, Danny Sheehan informed us all on what the protocol is about the recall Newsom election. I was grossly underinformed, as I found out virtually all my friends are. So this is a really call out to get people to understand what's at stake here. The way it works is everybody is going to be mailed a ballot. Do you support the recall of Governor Newsom? Yes or no? We want Newsom to stay, so we'll say no. The people who want him to go will say yes. Right now, Governor Newsom is polling 47% in the state. On last Wednesday, he was polling 48%. If the election, which is going to be on September 14th, if the election were held last Wednesday, Governor Newsom would have gotten 48%. And then there's over 40 people running to replace him. The second highest, there's, Caitlyn Jenner is 1%. There's a whole bunch of people. The mayor of San Diego, about 12%. The highest vote getter, talk show host who has no political experience at 18%. If this replays 1 month from now as it is now, Governor Newsom, if he doesn't get one vote more than 50%, is out and can't be part of the choice of people. He will be replaced by someone who has a plurality. In this case, it would be probably somewhere around 15 or 18%. In other words, it's extremely undemocratic, but that's where it is. I had thought, well, no one's going to place as high as he is. I don't know. I just naively thought it's whoever gets the most votes. No, that's not it. If he doesn't get 51% of the vote, he will be replaced immediately by whoever gets the highest vote. That's what I want to let people know. So the ballots are being mailed out starting on the 14th. People will get them over within a week or so. You can put them in a drop box. You can put them in the mailbox. The last day of voting is September 14th, and then we will either keep Newsom or have a new governor who will be very likely, because the money is pouring in from Trump sources to this guy. So that's what I wanted to report.
I have a reason, and then Dorothy Wright to Californians.
Tatanka, thank you so much for that report. I just, some of us have been talking, of course, we have to vote no in terms of the recall. I mean, we have to keep Gavin in. If we vote to recall him, we vote yes. If we don't want him recalled, we vote no. Is that,
That's correct. That's correct.
So I just wanted to draw a parallel, which isn't exactly the same thing, but one of the reasons that George W. Bush lost to Ann Richards to be governor of the state of California years ago was that Ann Richards lost the support of the environmental community and the anti-nuke community because she welcomed a dump for low-level radioactive waste in Sierra Blanca, Texas, and she also did the bidding of a lot of chemical industries and opened the door to ravage the environment in Texas. So I'm hoping that Gavin will maybe pay a little bit more attention to those of us who are disappointed but are still going to support his continuation as governor. That's all.
Well, what we want Gavin Newsom to do is very simple. PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, has burned down half the state. They're completely incompetent, totally out of control. And they run the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, that's the most terrifying sentence you could ever say. And we know that Diablo Canyon is embrittled, which is a very serious structural problem that could lead to a major catastrophe. And it needs to be inspected. We know it's embrittled, but we don't know how embrittled it is. And Diablo 2.5 years ago, we circulated a petition that was signed by Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Martin Sheen, the whole Hollywood left, and they completely blew us off. And I can't even get the media to cover it. But in October, Diablo Canyon Unit 1 will shut for refueling. And that's when they need to do the inspection. And we want Gavin Newsom to just politely ask PG&E to allow an independent inspection of Diablo Canyon Unit 1 so we can see how embrittled it is.
And Harvey, I would suggest that the quickest and most efficient way to get that done, Romero email campaign, which is greencal.org. And there you can send an email to Governor Newsom to declare an immediate state of climate emergency. He was in front of the fires today saying this is all due to climate change, but he did not declare a state of climate emergency. Without that, we can't pass our comprehensive Green New Deal because there's 13 different sectors. It has to be agriculture, drawing down, et cetera, public banking, 40% of all the jobs go to, economic justice issues. And you can't, it's illegal to do that in California. It has to be a separate little thing, a single issue. So it allows him to strike that, and it allows him to cut through the bullshit and get this done, which will put carbon neutral and then drawing down carbon in 10 years or less, not the 30-year Biden plan. So it's really important to do that, because if he declares a state of climate emergency, immediately we're gonna say, get on that nuclear plant. You can do that. That's real easy, and just go from there. So very, very important. Most people don't realize that in 2016, Donald Trump never got more than 18% in any Republican primary. And he wrote it to the White House. That's because, they thought Hillary Clinton would be it, and they thought they'd speed it up. The Republicans didn't dream that Trump would be in the race at that time. And he ran against 10 or 15 people. So he polled, and that's the replay of what we have here. They know they can't do what they do in Georgia and California, but, they're an organized crime outfit. They're going to go for the capo. They're going to go for the top. And so they set this up. He's got to have 51%, and he's not real popular right now. And if they can play on the left divisions, he'll be out, and then we'll get this clown in immediately.
Dorothy Reich?
Yeah, so, something about Gavin Newsom, he doesn't give a damn about any of us or what we think or what we want. I mean, he won't even end fracking in California. But the most important reason to oppose the recall is something that was brought up on Ian Masters today, or yesterday actually, that whoever gets, if he loses, the new governor, if Diane Feinstein gets sick, we got a Republican senator. And this is critical. So this is an argument for anybody, no matter how much they hate Gavin Newsom, no matter how disappointed they are. I wasn't disappointed because I didn't believe anything good about him in the first place. But that's the best argument I've heard for opposing the recall, because the Senate seat, we could lose our majority in the Senate and also have a Republican senator.
Jed Powder?
That's a great, we need to get that out there too. That's
I have a call into the chair of the LA County Democratic Party to bring that up to the powers that be. So he'll always call.
So I'm urging people not just individually to do this, but contact your constituencies. Get all your organizations to sound the alert to have everybody turn out and vote no on this recall, or else we have.
He doesn't need 51%. He needs 50% plus one.
That's right.
Right. Jed Pauker, and then.
Yeah, thanks. And that's exactly what indivisible groups are doing. We sent a letter to KEDMs. I'm sorry, to the governor a week or two ago. It got a meeting with the KEDMs, had the meeting with the KEDMs. They did everything. They agreed to everything that we wanted them to do. The groups are doing all the GOTV you could possibly want to do. All we need is people to do the work. And when I get a moment, I'll put the stuff into the chat where people can sign up, and I'd love it if people could send it out to their groups, to their individual groups, because a lot of it's virtual. We're also dropping stuff on doorsteps for flyers so that people understand it's vote no on one and just leave two blank. One thing about the California electoral structure, the election is so weird because that's the way the law is written. The law was written a long time ago, and it doesn't really apply today. We should have recall or not on one ballot, and then a whole new ballot on a second election, really. But we don't, and we can't fix that before this one. Lastly, we really want to use this as a support message for Gavin Newsom, who is going to receive our letter hand-delivered from Shirley Weber, Secretary of State Shirley Weber, any moment if he hasn't already, and tell him that he's got to fix our energy problem. Fracking, I have oil fields 2 miles away from me here in Venice. All of that stuff. We got to get him to stop it and declare the emergency and be done. That's all I got right now. Thanks.
Just remember, if anybody ever tells you the nuclear power fights global warming, just remind them that the core of a nuclear power reactor is a radioactive fire that burns at 571 degrees Fahrenheit. You do not cool the planet with a radioactive fire at 571 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't work.
Yeah, a few things. One is what he just said. Is there who just spoke? The guy with the expert briefing.
Jed Pauker.
Yeah, no, prior to Jed, the individual briefing. Right. Okay. I'm having trouble with the name. Here's my question. Jed is aligned with Indivisible. What seems completely missing is any serious attention to the points that Mr. Parker, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name, just said. What?
Tatanka.
Okay. Okay. So here's the situation. The national media and national organizations are just viewing this as some kind of faraway event in California. It's kind of a sign of the right wing rising, isn't it terrible? But what he just outlined in very clear ways is really important. So one, is there a clear-cut article or blog post that could be shareable and also give a rundown of where we are right now in terms of national high-profile groups paying attention to this issue that sets it for the national stakes, not just California, that I could share with journalists that I know, et cetera. I think it's a highly important issue that is getting kind of given all the other news that's competing nationally, Gavin Newsom's recall is like, oh, it's a thing, it's colorful, it's California. It's not the 5-alarm fire that was just conveyed here. So I would really appreciate if posting here and or Harvey sends around stuff that we could share, particularly myself with my contacts with professional journalists as one myself, okay? So please provide that, because what you just told me, Brand.
Is there a seminal article about this? You're muted.
The Romero Institute, by the end of today, should have a short, pithy article about it. There's a lot of people, including Newsom himself, is saying voting no, but I didn't realize the nature of it, that if we don't get 50% plus one vote, it won't matter that the person is getting 10%.
Right. But what I'm trying to convey is whatever is a center messaging or blog post or website can't just be limited to the logistical issues. It has to emphasize the national stakes, such as an extremist in charge of the governor, and that extremist will appoint a far-right Republican to replace anyone who retires or dies. These national stakes are totally unknown across every media outlet and every major liberal group in the country, as far as I can.
And if Gavin Newsom become
right.
So thank you, Tatanka.
Thank you, Art.
One detail. If God forbid, well, when is the next election for governor?
2022, another year.
All right. Okay. Lynn Feinerman and Justin and then Mary, and then we'll have to move on.
Before the next speaker, I also want to say that on the Green New Deal that we're putting together, it's going to ensure, and this is critical, because workers in the nuclear industry, workers in the fracking industry, in the oil industry, all those extractives, they're really tied to their well-paying union jobs in the petroleum industry right now. Our Green New Deal is going to assure them their jobs, but they will lose it. They can't do fracking work. They can't do nuclear work. It will all be clean energy.
Okay. Lynn Feinerman, then Justin, Mary.
Yeah, three things. I'm very thankful to Dorothy for having brought up this whole issue with regard to Feinstein and getting a Republican senator. That really we need some kind of ad that goes viral that just says that. We need to get right down to it and say, folks, if you don't get out and keep Gavin in office, we could have a Republican senator if Diane Feinstein goes down and she's in her 80s. Just something like that. I'd like to see if we can put together something really quick that will go viral, that will get people out to vote. Second, I'm wondering what kind of hijinks maybe, and I don't know if anybody's done any investigation on this, what kind of hijinks are they going to try to pull with regard to voting itself? What is we've got, LA has got this digital voting system, which sucks. And I won't say swamp water, maybe that's a swear word. But anyway, that I'm also worried about, very worried about. And is there anybody who has a deep connection to Gavin Newsom and can go and tell him, make an announcement that you're going to investigate Diablo and that you're going to do a few of these things, and the progressives will come out and keep you in the governorship? That's what I'd like to say.
I agree with you 100%. The letter that we got done 2.5 years ago was signed by Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Martin Sheen, Eric Roberts, Ed Asner, I mean, you name it, and he blew us off. 2,500 signatures, and all the Hollywood left, and he didn't care. I mean,
Harvey,
I know he got the letter.
Jesus Christ could sign the letter, and he wouldn't care, because Jesus Christ isn't giving him any money.
Well, Christ, I think, is a Republican. So,
lately.
At least that's what I hear.
mean, they did a thing that showed that he would get support from the progressives. He just not either, and he promised to do that when he was campaigning.
Yeah, I understand all that. but who can help me put together something on this about Diane Feinstein and get it out? Who can get it out? How can
Well, I'm in touch with the California Democratic Party, and I just texted the chair of the LA County Democratic Party, who's been working on the recall stuff, and I sent him that message, and I imagine it's going to get to where it needs to get.
Okay. Yeah.
The Democratic Party has plenty of money. Gavin Newsom has $45 million to spend.
I feel like California Dems have done nothing.
Well, they're trying. They're setting up all kinds of postcarding, phone banking, all this stuff. You don't know about it because you don't get the emails to recruit people to do it, but they're on it. It's just that Gavin hasn't been on it. He needs to get out. He needs to fight for his job.
Well, I think, of course, the alternative is that Diane Feinstein could resign tomorrow, and we could have a new senator by the end of the week. I think you'd be a good choice, Dorothy. Justin LeBlanc, and then Mary.
So that was exactly what I was going to say, is that this isn't the first time we've seen this kind of thing. We've had Democratic Supreme Court justices that refused to retire in a timely fashion as well. And look what happened with their replacements. And now we
have one right now. We have Breyer refuses to retire.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is something that is quite serious on a number of levels. My first thought is that not only should she retire, but Dorothy, I don't know if you can actually get this in people's drive commute time radio slots, because that's when people are mostly listening to the news, is on the way and to and from work. And so getting a clear message right there when nobody else will would be a good thing. So there are two more pieces to all this that are very important. This one is a just random piece of trivia. Take it for what you will. But Governor Newsom's ex-wife became the girlfriend of President Trump's son.
Yeah, we know.
So this is a wild and crazy setup we have.
That's not new news. That's been going on for a couple of years already.
Okay.
The best is yet to come.
The last important part about TATANKA's statement and the Green New Deal, yes. So as far as nuclear contacts, if somebody can get me the letter, Harvey, I will send it to someone who actually designed one of the cooling pools for Diablo and see what he says about all that. Okay,
I get that. I can put that in the. We'll put that in the chat if I can find it before the end of the call. I appreciate that. Mary, and then BRYNN, please. Mary.
Right. I want to bring up the fact that a lot of people don't realize how bad it actually is. My husband that I was married to was a millwright back in Maine. And back in Maine Yankee Power Plant, 3 different times almost went, melted down. One of the times was because the pump wasn't turned on to put the new water in as they were pumping the new water out. And they were less than 1/4 of an inch from a meltdown that day. But
well, we've had plenty of close calls at Diablo too. Anybody in California that's not aware of Diablo Canyon, you're missing the biggest danger. And we do have Ray LUTZ on the call, who was a major factor in getting San Onofre shut. So Mary, you want to wrap up and then we'll get to BRYNN.
All right, I just wanted to state we need to lobby to have new and cleaner power renamed and properly given its death name that it needs. For it to continue with the 1950s, we got to sell it to the public and call it new cleaner. So we call it nuclear. We got to get rid of that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mary. BRYNN TANNEHILL, let me introduce you. BRYNN TANNEHILL is author of this book. I don't know why it doesn't show. There we go. It's got a great cover, American Fascism. It's the first book I've read cover to cover in a long time. It does a very, very thorough job of discussing all the issues that we've been discussing on these calls. I want to thank Art Levine for putting us in touch with her. BRYNN, where are you exactly?
So I'm located in the Northern Virginia area.
Okay, Okay, so her book, I highly recommend. I know your publisher is on the call. Put the links to how to get it in the chat if you would. And what did you want to say about this?
So the consensus inside the Beltway is that if for some reason Democrats lose control of the Senate, Joe Biden will never put another judge on the Supreme Court. That's McConnell will, even if it means sitting on Supreme Court justice nominees for 6 or 7 years, he will happily do that, which is the stakes for the California recall are quite possibly the Supreme Court, or potentially watching it become a 7-2 Supreme Court, or worse. And at that point, the court becomes a rubber stamp for whatever horrible Republican administration comes next.
Yes, and in your book, you detail very, very clearly the mechanisms that they have for totally wrapping up the government. Can you give us a quick summary of that while I got you going here?
So the ways that what we call competitive authoritarianism, which is a kind of government that's emerged since the end of the Cold War, is that they tilt elections so far that the opposition can never win again. We see this with gerrymandering and voter suppression and loading up the courts with Republicans. But the one that looks to me to be the most dangerous is the fact that they are setting up to have legislatures and local voting officials overturn elections, and also priming members of the House and Senate to believe that if they want to live or keep their jobs, they need to vote to overturn any election that doesn't come out in favor of Republicans. At that point, given how gerrymandered the House is, it effectively becomes impossible to ever elect a Democrat again. And at that point, we become a permanent single-party state run by a party that is essentially fascist, with the GOP and radicalized and extraordinarily dangerous to both the environment and to any minority that falls afoul of them.
And you do a great job of detailing this. I want to point out one thing. I've got a piece coming up in Reader-Supported News, and I played off your book quite extensively, and I hope you'll keep joining our calls, because you're a very great resource. And again, please post the how to get your book in the chat here. We have to understand, and this is going to go a little deep in the weeds, and then we'll get to Paul Newman. But what's going on in the country in the bigger picture is that we have a generational changeover here, which is the millennials and the Zoomers are now a third of the country. And they are way to the left of even the baby boomers. They're much more diverse, sexually advanced, friendly to the Green New Deal and all that stuff. These two generations, it's about 72 million millennials, 65 million Zoomers. And if the Zoomers and the millennials alone had voted in 2016 and 2020, Trump would have lost by more than 400 electoral votes. The millennials and the Zoomers in Texas and in Florida and in other right-wing states overwhelmingly opposed Trump. They are very, very advanced. There are a lot of things you can say about a big generation. So the white supremacists, the right wing, understands. Have 4 millennial daughters and 1 Zoomer daughter. And if these kids are allowed to vote, they understand that they're done. And so this holding action that is outlined in BRYNN's book and that we've been talking about for 60 weeks is a desperate attempt to prevent the demographic tsunami that's coming. I mean, that we all know that by 2050, the United States will be a majority minority country. In other words, whites will be in a minority in this country in 2040 and 50. And that's why these right wingers are so crazy, because they're looking at a tidal wave and they know that they cannot allow democratic elections because they're going to be swept away. So our job is to wipe away the barriers to true democracy, because the good news is that in a true democracy in the United States today, we win. And, my piece today, in 1999, Richard, I forget his name now, Paul Weyrich, an extreme right-wing functionary, very smart guy, wrote a piece and said that they had lost the culture war. You know, we boomers, we faced the empire and we faced the culture, and we're 1 for 2. We didn't end the empire, but we sure did turn the culture around. And they came to understand that, and that's why they're so fierce, because they know that if the stuff that's outlined in Brynn's book and that we've been talking about comes to pass, and we actually get a democracy, they're done. So let's just keep that in mind. Brynn, I hope you'll stay with us. Paul Newman from California.
Yes, my question is can Biden put more Supreme Court justices in the Supreme Court? I mean, I've heard people talk about it in the past as a solution that Biden can do, because what we have now is just unbelievable reactionary judges. And this has had in the past horrible effects on the election. The 2001 election with Bush. And, you know, it scares me. And then okaying gerrymandering in Ohio. So can he do that?
Well, in 1937, Franklin Roosevelt tried it. Franklin Roosevelt had just won a major landslide. He carried like the whole country. He was no president has ever been more popular than Franklin Roosevelt was in 1937. And he tried to pack the court and it didn't work. I mean, they stopped him cold. He was way more popular than Joe Biden is now. And he had a Democratic Congress and he couldn't do it, but he got lucky. And a bunch of the guys on the court died. And then 2 of the people on there turned very left, Hugo Black and William O. Douglas. And from 1937 to the 70s, when Nixon took over the court, we had a liberal court. Also, one of the great accidents in history, Dwight Eisenhower put Earl Warren, the governor of California, who was a Republican, on the court, and he thought Earl Warren was going to be, and he turned out to be very liberal. I don't know if we're going to get any kind of luck like that. 3 of the current Supreme Court justices, Roberts, who's been terrible on voting rights his entire career, like Rehnquist before him. The 2 recent Supreme Court Chief Justices, William Rehnquist and John Roberts, have built their entire careers on voter suppression. That's what they do. And then you've got Kavanaugh and Amy Barrett were both involved in the theft of the 2000 election. They were in various functions with Roberts to overturn, to do Bush v. Gore. So, you know, we're in deep doo-doo on this stuff. And it's terrifying, as Brynn shows in her book, and we know what we're up against. Dorothy Wright? Dorothy?
So I just wanted to tell you that I did hear back from the chair of the LA County Democratic Party, which is the biggest, you know, Democratic Party in the whole state. And he agrees with everything I mentioned about the climate emergency. I mentioned about Medicare for all. And I said, at least let him end fracking. But he needs to do something to get the progressives, and they need to say something about Diane Feinstein, that we could get a Republican governor. So he has the ear of the people who are running this campaign. He's part of the brain trust for the whole thing. So hopefully.
Well, let's hope. And remember that the thing we're asking about Diablo is very simple. We're not asking him to shut it down, although we'd love him to. We're asking him to inspect the thing. Just go in there and see what's going on there, because we know what's going on, and no sane engineer.
I think ending fracking will get more attention than Diablo, but that's just me.
Well, we'll see, but let's hope. Okay, Justin, Jeffrey, and then Art.
All right.
Justin?
Come back to me in a moment.
Jeffrey, real quick. You're on mute. Got to unmute. And then Art.
Same here. Come back to me in just a second.
Okay, so I'm basically asking if Brynn can be given a few minutes, given your radio audience, to give a brief outline of her main points of her book and where we stand now in terms of voting rights and the threat to our democracy. That's what I'd like.
Okay, let's do that, and then we'll proceed with Steve Caruso. We'll leave California, we'll go to New York, and then Arizona. As usually, this is really packed. So, Brynn, give us the quick lowdown on what we faced, and then do stick with us, please.
Okay, so for a brief outline of my book, the first 3 chapters are kind of history and background. And then Some of the other chapters are on things like media and dumbing down and deliberate misinformation and propaganda. It also talks about wealth inequality and other contributing factors to why we've gone down this fascist path. Then it talks about fascism and how Republicans are deliberately subverting democracy through gerrymandering and voter suppression and laws that favor them, and filling the courts with people who interpret voting rights laws in a way that favor them. Finally, chapters 10 is mostly about competitive authoritarianism, and a warning in chapter 11, which basically says we are going down what resembles a one-way path towards competitive authoritarianism, where we still have elections that are sort of free but completely unfair, that only allows for one possible outcome, which is electing Republicans to control a majority of the House, Senate, and presidency. And one of the biggest points of my book is that once we go over that cliff, there is no roadmap for a country recovering from competitive authoritarianism since the end of the Cold War. Nobody's come back. Nobody's figured out a way to get back to democracy from there. You look at Hungary and Russia, Turkey, in particular, as prime examples of what competitive authoritarianism looks like. And there is no plausible path that anybody can figure out to make them democracies again. And I worry that we are sleepwalking towards putting ourselves in a situation where elections cease to be able to affect meaningful change for the rest of our natural lives. And that is essentially, for as much talk as there is of what we want to do on environmental issues, functionally, if that happens, nothing good will ever happen again on environmental issues. We're done.
Wow, I have read this book cover to cover, and it really gives a good executive summary of what we face. Bryn, these calls are dedicated to finding ways of making what you just said not happen. So it's really worth looking at this thing. It's a great sort of handbook.
Harvey, just 10 seconds here to talk. I want to thank you, Bryn, and I just want to say Danny Sheehan of Romero Institute said the same thing when he sounded the warning. He said it won't matter. We could get every Democrat in the legislature in California to pass this bill, and it would be vetoed, and it would go nowhere. It's that crucial.
Yes, and this kind of thing with the recall, these guys, I don't know why the Democrats are such wimps. That's the biggest question we face in this country. Why are the Democrats such wimps? And you talk about that, and we really got to figure out a way to have a political party that actually fights and doesn't roll over. Steve Caruso?
Yeah, we're Stockholm. Davis Bessie had a scram July 8th, which means they had to shut down the core. They had a turbine go out, and they injected too much fluid or water to cool it, so they overcooled the reactor, which could lead to cracking as well. So that's just a quick.
And Davis Bessie nuclear plant, the number one, the biggest joke if a nuclear plant could be a joke, it's Davis Bessie. Okay, Jeffrey, real quick, and then Justin, and then we got to move on.
This is for Brian. This is for Brian.
What?
This is for Brian.
Go ahead.
Can you
go?
Can she unmute herself so she can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All righty.
Okay.
Brian, I want to know if I can have a copy of your emails so I can stay in touch for a special project I'm working on.
Okay.
For a special.
Bryn, put your contacts in the chat if you would.
Okay.
How to get your book, and I'm sure you have a website that people can correspond with you. And thank you, Jeffrey, for that. I'm sure
I wanted to have a one-on-one Zoom meeting with her, so
Okay, that's fine. Justin, real quick.
All right, this question is also for Bryn. So I know you and a number of commentators are focusing. Can you hear me now?
Here. You got an audio problem, Justin. Can you fix it?
I can understand you.
All right, go ahead.
Jeffrey,
hold on. Let's see if I can fix it.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of commentators are focusing on the modern era, especially post-Cold War. I've noticed through a lot of discussions in election integrity groups that there are a lot of parallels to post-Civil War in America. Everything from the Electoral College issues and contesting the vote to rewriting of constitutions in order to disenfranchise certain kinds of voters, so on and so forth. I am wondering specifically what your thoughts are in terms of economic power. So progressive era unions weren't legal, and yet people formed them anyway and pushed back against the corporate fascist states in the Gilded Age. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So it's interesting you brought that up. The entire first chapter is primarily focused on Reconstruction and its failure and the destruction of voting rights and how difficult it was to come back from that. From the time of Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus Board of Education, I believe it was 76 years.
1858 to 1954.
Yep. So it was 3 generations, a lifetime for most people. So my assertion that once we lose it, it's not coming back is borne out by U.S. history. As far as fighting back against the Gilded Age, I would argue that in this electronic age, corporations are far more powerful in many ways than they were in 1905 when we got Lochner versus New York. They can do things in surreptitious ways that would make, the Carnegies of the world, drool with envy. I question how much we can push back, particularly my book observes of fascism, that fascist governments tend to favor the rich and the elite because the message has always been, and we saw this with Orban, we've seen this under Putin, that the message of fascist governments is stay out of my way, you'll get rich beyond your wildest dreams, just don't mess with the dear leader, and you'll be fine. And that's where I expect us to go if we end up falling into competitive authoritarianism.
In the power of the corporations on the web should see this movie called The Great Hack. It's about Cambridge Analytica, which was set up by Steve Bannon, specifically to put Trump in the White House. And they played off Facebook filings and understood how to shape their messages. Very, very devastating. And everybody should see The Great Hack, along with The Social Dilemma, which also lays out how the internet can be gamed to manipulate public opinion. Those 2 movies are absolutely critical. The Great Hack and The Social Dilemma.
Competitive authoritarianism in that regard. So actually that particular movement was largely sponsored by a guy named Alexander Torshin out of Russia. He created false front organizations to infiltrate the United States and taught a lot of the GOP the tactics that Russia had been using for their own propaganda to control their own people.
And ironically, Chapter 3 talks about how the religious right helped import Russian-style thinking into the United States and has acted as a conduit since roughly 97 or 98.
Yes, and it's absolutely critical to understand how that's been done. Thank you, Justin. I want to very quickly mention New York State. I think we're going to, that Andrew Cuomo is going to go, but it's not the same situation. He does have a second in command. She will take over. I don't know about her politics. I don't know if anybody in New York on the call can comment on what I've never been a fan of Andrew Cuomo. He did shut Indian Point, thankfully, but he also bailed out the other 4 reactors in the state. He's a mean guy. He's a mean guy. And maybe having, I don't know if New York, I don't think New York has ever had a female governor. And so it's a very different situation from California. It is ironic or whatever that you have California and New York both about to lose or on the brink of losing Democratic governors. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay. Mary, if you'll hold, please. I do have our trio, our great 3 musketeers from Arizona with us. And I do want to get an update. JOHN BRAKEY, Ray Lutz, and Steve Rosenfeld. Steve, if you're still on, can you update us on Arizona, please? And then we're going to go to Charles and Joel. We're going to talk about upcoming events in DC. We're at the top of the hour. Those of you listening on Progressive Radio Network, thank you for being with us. We will see you next week. If you want to listen to the rest of the call, excuse me, go to www.electionprotection2024.org, get the link. We are going to proceed for another 40 minutes that's taped, and then we'll kibitz for 20 minutes after that. But you can definitely listen to the rest of the recorded call, www.electionprotection2024, and we'll meet again next week at the usual time. John Brakey.
If I can interrupt for a sec, this is Julie from New York. Hochschild is.
Oh, Julie, yes, I didn't know you were with us.
Yeah, hi. Well, she's a moderate.
Go ahead. Tell us about the next governor of New York.
Yeah, I don't know enough to really talk long. I just can tell you she's a moderate. That's her reputation. I read some history that right now isn't in my head. She's not very impressive as a progressive. She's a moderate, but now, as far as we know.
If Cuomo leaves, will there be an election for governor next year?
I believe she would. Yes, and she'd be in a better position to run against the Republican.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger is not going to run in New York, right? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, well, we'll see what happens. We'll know more next week, but I'm betting that he's going to have to go. I mean, Biden already said he should go. He's not the kind of let go easy ground to stand on anymore. So we'll see what happens. Okay, Rebecca Landau, you want to get in real quick, and then we'll go to John, Steve, and Ray.
I just want to say, for now 14 months in Clubhouse in some locked rooms, there's been New York staffers of all levels, from municipal to the governor's mansion, who have been on fire about this. So this is I feel like there's a lot more lava that's coming under this. I'm very interested to see what happens. There is a real feeling of corruption and back and forth, and people who are scared, but who are also like furious now. So
they want him to go, I assume. You got muted. We're getting a big answer, and suddenly you're gone. Yes, they want him to go.
Yes, this isn't been for 14 months on Clubhouse. There's been closed rooms of people of men and women, predominantly women, discussing what's happening and where this is going. And the fury in those rooms is pretty intense against Cuomo and his enablers. It's going to be very interesting, and it kind of feels a little Tammany Hall.
Okay, I'm betting within 2 weeks he'll be gone, but we'll see what happens. And thank you for that. That's critical information, Rebecca. We appreciate it. Okay, John, Steve, Ray, want to tell us about Arizona, and then we're going to talk with Charles Moreland and Joel Segal about the upcoming events in DC.
Well, I just quickly want to go to Steve Rosenfeld, because of the article he just put out. Really nails the dilemma that we have in Arizona, is how is this thing going to end? And, my personal belief is that we're dealing with grifters, and I don't want it to come in. All three things that they've done thus far publicly is about raising money. And these people like Doug Logan, they put out how much money they received. And if you add it up, it doesn't even add up right. When theoretically we hear there was 7 million raised, Pulitzer said 9 million, and Doug Logan has received 5.7, and he reports that he's $50,000 off. And you go, my God, if he can't add up the money, how is he supposed to add up the votes? In summary, the article that Steve put out, I'm going to let him explain, but all I know is my concern is that this thing will end without us knowing, and it becomes a legend and a theory that it was when it wasn't. Steve?
Well, hi, everybody. So here's what this is. There have been a team of three outside auditors. One is Larry Moore, the founder of Clear Ballot, CEO, his chief technical officer, Tim Halverson and Benny White, who is been a longtime Republican Party observer from Pima County. As John would call him, he's the anti-Brakey. But together, what they have been doing is they've been going into a wider circle of public election records to try to identify, to underscore why Biden won and explain what happened with Republican voters. And the research that they have generated is remarkable. So they released a report at the end of last week, and in it, there were some new wrinkles. Some of these wrinkles are really, really interesting. So for example, they went in and they got the results, and these results were available by November 15th or 20th. They found on every day of early voting in Maricopa County, every single day, that Trump was never ahead of Biden. And they were able to break this down and verify this. Then they were able to, we're not even talking about ballot images here. We're talking about voter rolls and voting lists and the cast vote record, which is the giant spreadsheet of the official results. They're able to take a look at where now this has been reported before, you can take a look at the ballots and you could see where people vote for a majority of Republicans, but don't vote for Trump, and vote for a majority of Democrats and don't vote for Biden. Well, earlier on, they had found about 75,000 ballots in where people had voted for majorities of Republican and not for Trump, and vice versa, where about 20,000 voted for a majority of Democrats, not for Biden. So they could take those and bring it down to the geographic area. Now, this is voter turnout research that people like Michael McDonald and the other sources for the New York Times on voter turnout data did or will do. But no one's done this there. Neither the Democratic Party, and they have partisan observers too, nor the election officials in Maricopa County, nor many of the think tanks that we always are hearing about, voting rights, we need to give them money. They found, for example, in precincts and jurisdictions where there were more registered Republicans than Democrats, that there was about a 3 to 5% shift in people who voted for a majority of Republicans, but not for Trump. So the other thing that they did, and this goes down to actually the way that to try to hold the ninjas accountable, they and create and trace an inventory of the ballots as they are collected, counted, and assembled and archived, and then stored. And then what the ninjas did is they ripped open those boxes and didn't go along incrementally to try to do comparisons, cross-referencing. That's what a lot of audits are all about. So the thing that's happening here is these folks, and again, it's led by, Larry Moore is a Democrat. Benny White is a non-Trump Republican. These guys are trying to lay down the gauntlet, but set a very high standard by which you can judge what the ninjas are doing. Without getting totally lost in the weeds there, they haven't released any numbers, not their hand count. They knew that their hand count was off. Ken Bennett told me on a Zoom call, he thought it was off by more than 5,000 votes. And that's why they brought in these machines that just counted the number of ballots. And they haven't released those totals either. And you see, all of this translates into inventory controls. And do you have an accurate result? Where is there a mistake? What caused it? Was it fixed? And, was the outcome legitimate? So the thing about this is, while this is happening, the pushback from the Trumpers is getting more shrill. Now, there was a Facebook post by the lead lawyer for the ninjas, Brian Blem, on Benny White's Facebook page that basically it was a rant of just profanities, saying, you're bought and you're sold, you're not a Republican, you've never audited anything. The Clear Ballot, by the way, has audited over 200 elections, from coast to coast. And it basically was saying, you folks believe everything Dominion has told you. Now, this is the same line, that somehow somebody magically got inside the system and rigged it on behalf of Biden, that Sidney Powell made, and Lynn Wood and these other lawyers made, that are being sanctioned. There are these cases now, these hearings that are coming up. There was a ruling in Colorado last week. They had to pay court costs. They stand to lose their law license in Michigan, another federal court. Giuliani, for this same line. But what's happening here is they are sort of ramping up to, one, not issue a final report. They're going to say that the Maricopa County didn't give them everything they needed, stuff that nobody can even understand what these things are, the public at large. And then they're going to say, and what Blem is signaling is that they're basically going to say that it was rigged from the inside by people at Dominion. And
they're not backing down, the Republicans.
And the latest thing that happened was, on July 15th, there was a legislative briefing where the Senate President and the Senate Judiciary Committee Chair, afterwards, they issued a subpoena for more records from the county. The county said, we're not giving you some of this stuff. Some of it was law enforcement. Whether if you want to argue about whether that's legit or not, let's just push that to the side. A Senator, Borelli, who Trump probably named more than a dozen times when he had a rally on July 24th in Phoenix, invoked an arcane law that is requiring the state attorney general to investigate this. Because, why they're not turning this stuff over. That's going to be a 2 to 3 month long process. So this narrative just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. It doesn't stop. So so what's going to end up happening is there are a few things like, what's the focal points here? One, I think reports like this that are based on actual facts that show and prove and explain, Biden's victory here. I think it's really important. I think it's notable that the public records show this. I think it's regrettable that our friends, on the left and in the center and in think tanks and in academia and in the Democratic Party aren't, and state election officials, they're not using this in their own defense. They've allowed this vacuum to be created that's gone on now for more than half a year when the data is there. It's truly shocking to me. But beyond that, then what happens is, if you think about it, they're getting more. This seems to indicate that, the Trumpers, this is to my sense, they knew all along they were on their way to losing. So they just kept ramping up, doing and trying to do everything. And we keep seeing more and more evidence of this. The Justice Department, that guy Clark, who was trying to get the DOJ to send a memo to Georgia's legislators to reject the popular vote and appoint their own slate of electors, going back into the summer of, attacking the post office. It's a different narrative than what. And I think we need to think about, hey, there is a different narrative here. That's because they are running scared from these facts.
Okay.
And so where this is now, and I'll kick it back to John and Ray, is very simply got outed by the word of it got out into the Arizona Republic, and Ken Bennett was locked out of this warehouse. They were doing all of this. And it wasn't because I was on the call. It was just that he was talking to these outside auditors. That's what pissed off the ninjas. And they said this whole thing like, oh my gosh, we can't trust you. You're talking to outsiders and critics. All along, Bennett has been talking, and John will tell you this, to anyone who can give him factual information about what is real. And now what's happening is he's gone back inside. And this is the final point. He's gone back inside, and he basically has agreed that he'll be able to review whatever the report is by the ninjas and write some kind of, let's call it a dissent. Like in lawsuits, you have judges where the majority agrees this, but at the Supreme Court, there's a dissent and they say why. I don't think that Bennett has a team of people available for him in Arizona that he can call upon to rebut in the microscopic, in the weeds, technical detail laden stuff that these guys are going to put out to perpetuate their conspiracy theory. if in fact they actually issue a report. And I'm going to kick it over to John at this point, because the thing is, John has a relationship with Ken and they trust each other. And Ken probably wouldn't have taken these stands and threatened to quit and this other stuff were it not for John.
Okay.
But, it really looks to me like they are in the data fabrication business and they're going to come up with a lot of crazy stuff. And as seen by the invective-filled Facebook comments, on Benny White's website, yesterday by the Ninja's lawyer after looking at this latest report.
So basically, Steve, thank you for that report. It's great. We have people who are doing incredible work, who are telling us what's really going on in Arizona, and they're putting out substantive reports, and they're getting attacked as we would expect by the Republicans. Who have their own narrative. I mean, it's very comprehensive. Very, very grateful you three guys have been in Arizona. I mean, it's really amazing. Let me get to John in a minute. BRYNN TANNEHIll, you wanted to jump in with something real quick, and then we'll go to JOHN BRAKEY, and then we're going to talk to Charles Moreland and Joel Segal about the upcoming events in DC. But this is essential stuff that nobody else is doing. So thank you so much, Steve. BRYNN, did you want to make a comment? Then we'll go to JOHN BRAKEY.
Yes. So the Arizona audit, what's going on there, audit, is part of a larger plan by the GOP. They're looking forward to, in particular, the 2024 election, and they have a plan and they have a backup plan. The plan is that they're going to win in 2024 the way they did in 2016. Hopefully, the voter suppression and other efforts to limit the vote allows him to Trump or DeSantis to squeak out an electoral college victory despite losing an even larger percentage of the national popular vote. But they're keeping in their back pocket the opportunity to overturn the election. And the Arizona audit is part of that. With their base, support for overturning an election, which involves both creating in the minds of the base the idea that any loss by Republicans must be fraud, and also defending the insurrectionists of January 6th unscathed, because they want their legislators to be afraid to not vote to overturn the election next time. And that's kind of where this is leading and why they're doing it in the big picture of things, is they are laying the groundwork to justify to their base why they effectively ended democracy in America. And it's because they want to preserve democracy, or as we see with Tucker Carlson in Hungary and other Republicans supporting the fascist authoritarian Hungarian regime of Viktor Orban, they are making the argument that we need fascism to protect democracy and save America from itself and the liberals, who are, as we all know, all communists. So this is kind of the big picture that we're seeing here. And the Arizona audit fits into that jigsaw puzzle as one of the necessary, almost corner pieces to justifying what they plan on doing.
Wow, very well.
Just if I could add on to that, is that you are so right in that point of view, and that is why I and Steve and Benny White and others got involved in order to help grab people out of this tribal craziness that is going on, because sometimes we want to look at these people and ignore them and make believe they're going to go away, when the reality is they're being totally misled by grifters who are involved, coming in and doing one. I mean, the Arizona audit of the most outrageous thing was run by a QAnon disciple who, in the movie The Deep Rig, which was everything they put out was propaganda to raise more money and ignore the facts, block people like me and Ken Bennett from getting information. It was an incredible experience, and I think that your book is a very insightful view of what's going on behind the scenes. And I hope that Steve comes out with a book with what we've learned and are still learning. And I can see that my other cohort, Ray LUTZ, is on the screen there. So I'm going to sign off right here and let Steve go in. Ray, say some things.
Ray LUTZ, we have 59 people on the call. We've got about 11 minutes, 19 minutes left on the recorded part. So we'll do this with Arizona, and then we'll go to Charles, Moreland, and Joel Segal. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, one thing that I think that Stephen's article brought out was that we're going to have to audit this audit and try to show that it's fraudulent. What we and I can't agree more with BRYNN about this, is that they're trying to set this up as a way to say, and it's easy for them to try to find a way to say, oh, there might have been something wrong with the audit. That's all they got to get. They have to be able to say, we should not trust it. And that's a lot easier to say than it's trustworthy. Now that's a lot of work. And so we have to do a lot of work technically to make sure that we can show what they usually are doing, was just trying to validate that everything was done okay. That's, basically doing the audits versus let's see if we can find anything that looks a little bit wacky and then act like it's horrible. I am actually very, very worried about this, and that's why I think we've got to stay completely engaged and try to make sure that we can expose this. The article that actually this other group did, their paper, I encourage anybody to read that paper that they wrote, because it was done quite well done. And I'm so happy that they were engaged on it and looking at all these details. I mean, a lot of the stuff that they had, I didn't get to, but thanks a lot. And I just already ordered your book, BRYNN. It looks, you guys, fantastic.
Again, the three of you in Arizona have done incredible work, without which we wouldn't have any idea what was going on there. Alan Minsky from Progressive Democrats of America has joined the call, as has Dennis Bernstein from KPFA. Alan, did you want to say something? And then Dennis?
Yeah, very quickly, just a follow up from last week when I came on. And Mike Hirsch and I, sorry for the phone ringing in the background, everybody. We followed through, of course, and today we sent an email to all of our members across the country, and they are calling, and they have been all day, Senate offices on Capitol Hill. And we, don't want to exclude the people in Republican states, though we, of course, understand only one party is really in play here, and asking them, telling them that they need to pass voting rights legislation for recess. Now, I was on a call earlier today with a representative of the White House and people who had been in close contact with Chuck Schumer's office. Of course, what needs to pass and pass this week specifically pertains to partisan gerrymandering. That's the element of all that needs to be passed in voting rights and election protection and everything. That's the thing that has a deadline right away, because the census data, the final census data relevant for the drawing of districts, is now being released. We actually were hoping it would be the 16th. It's going to be the 12th, this Thursday, at which point we should have no illusions. They are the Republicans in the state legislatures that are going to draw the districts. They've already come up with their plan. It's going to be right away, and it's going to be savage. If it was always terrible before, and I've spoken to Steve about this kind of thing a while ago, I can only imagine they're going to try to find even a few more districts that they can squeeze out. And of course, everything in For the People Act, John Lewis Voting Rights Act, needs to pass. That's our feeling. We already know, though, that the bill is going to be introduced this week again. It will obviously just be a sort of performance act, because we know the Republicans, again, for the second time, will block S1, the For the People Act. And by the way, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act has not yet been introduced even to the House, because Sewell, the author of it, has been compiling all the data for all the shenanigans the Republicans are pulling around the country. So that's coming forward. But the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and everything in the For the People Act, we understand any Republican votes for this in the Senate, they're going to be off the team. It's not going to happen. This can only pass, and it can't pass now, it can only pass with a change in the Senate rules. Now, in the meeting I was at earlier with a number of progressive organizations, it was confirmed that there are negotiations for what, in particular, Sinema and Manchin and a handful of other Democratic senators will agree to in terms of filibuster reform. And it's looking like the best chance is for a specified carve-out, which happens to be what Mike and I at PDA have been advocating now for a while. Number of prominent Democrats have been advocating specifically for this, notably Jim Clyburn from South Carolina, obviously a very powerful member of the House. And that is how things will proceed. Here's the downside, because we're dealing with the Democratic Party, of course, right? Is somehow it hasn't gotten through their head. The current calendar is effective. So the goal right now, as the plan is laid out, and Schumer is, at least now I haven't heard this from Schumer himself, and he wouldn't say it publicly, but again, on the call I was on earlier, you know, Oregon, Heather Booth MCs, a lot of very prominent Democratic, progressive people organized this biweekly call of progressive organizations. And they get the people from the White House, they get the people from Schumer's office. And so they are saying they are going to introduce the bill. It's going to go nowhere. A second bill is being drafted and negotiated from the Democratic caucus. Okay, by the way, there will be a first volley at a watered down bill from the For the People Act that will seek 60 votes. That will also get 0 votes from the Republicans. Then they will introduce a bill if they have word that they can have 50 votes to reform the filibuster in a way that can get this legislation through. And all of that will take place, most of it before they go, but the final bill, according to the calendar, will be the first bill they will vote on when they return from recess, which of course we feel is too late. So on another call immediately after the call I was on earlier, people were talking about who can be for voting rights and the calendar, the necessity of the calendar, specifically around partisan gerrymandering, who can do for this issue what Cori Bush did for evictions 1 week ago. And again, unfortunately, it's restricted only to the population of the US Senate to be effective. But all of this is happening right now. A lot of the media is very much focused on the budget reconciliation numbers, the process of the bipartisan infrastructure bill going through the Senate. But behind the scenes, good sources reliable sources are saying that reliable sources are telling them that all of this is happening and it's happening this week. So we're calling Congress tomorrow, this large coalition. Mike Hirsch maybe help me here because I forget what the acronym is. DFAD has a national day of action. So today is a day of action for PDA. Tomorrow is another day of action for PDA, but in coordination with this large national group, DFAD, again, to call upon the Senate to pass voting rights ASAP. And sometimes they don't quite state why it has to be ASAP, which leaves some people confused. But the ASAP right now is so that we can have legislation, federal legislation, that blocks continuation of partisan gerrymandering. I suppose since this is a show where everybody is so well informed and knows details, it is looking like the bill that will finally come through. We want it to be before the break. Schumer is saying it's the first bill voted on after the break. I think that's too late. Once they set the districts, you have a situation in which a candidate is going to sue if they change the districts after they've already think they're running in a specific district. It's going to be very difficult once the Republicans set districts for them to be reversed to 2022. So it has to be ASAP that they do this. We want to see it in the next week to tell them not to take a break until this is completed. And just again, for the detail I was promising there, initially in the For the People Act, it calls for independent commissions. I think what's going to probably have to happen is it'll call for independent commissions, but for this year, it has to be something different than that because I don't think there's the time available to establish those commissions in these states to set the district. So that's a complication, and it's something that we want to have independent commissions remain in the law. By the way, if there are people here who think they're better, more equitable structures, you all are much more expert on this stuff than I am. Certainly to my ears, the independent commission structure seems like the way to go. That's what was in the For the People Act, which already passed the House. So that measures in there from that passage in the House. The bill is going to reflect that. There may be that one change ultimately and what they first try to get through on the calendar.
Alan, you want people to be calling in on your, and you put the links in the chat here, how people can jump in.
Mike, they didn't post on our website the national email. Is there a way we can get the essential detail from the email, just copy and paste it and drop it into the chat?
Yeah, put it in the chat, please, as soon as you can.
I'm sorry to go on so long, but there is a lot there, and I hope I captured it all.
We're almost out of the recorded time. Dennis Bernstein, did you want to say a word? And then we'll go back to BRYNN TANNEHILL. Dennis Bernstein from KPFA, are you with us? Please do.
I'm here. I'm here, but I'm just learning, listening and learning. Just coming.
Joel's been itching to get a word in here.
What's that?
Joel has been itching.
Joel Siegel?
Always love to hear from Joel.
Hey, Brother Alan.
Hey, Joel.
We're almost out of the recording time, but we're going to proceed after the recording ends. About a lot of stuff. Joel Siegel.
Yeah, Alan, thanks for your leadership and for Progressive Democrats of America being on the cutting edge of knowing how to pressure the Congress. So I think with the John Lewis Advancement Act, there are many, many organizations and constituencies that would want to engage, like especially all the people, on this national call. And the question I have is, how are they getting other organizations or other leaders across the country, to weigh in? I know, Mike Hirsch, you remember this, when we did our call-in days for HR 676, we had over 1,000 organizations. We had labor, civil rights groups, interfaith groups, every single ethnic group, but it was all coordinated. Everybody got a flyer, but we did it once a week. And we were as good as the National Rifle Association. What do you think we need to do to increase the numbers of the calls?
Well, the organization, and I don't really know, I apologize, we at PDA are lobbying on so many fronts. I try to live in the real world, and when an umbrella organization comes up, I would like to, of course, share with the great people on this call, all partners with PDA, of course, what this particular umbrella organization is, where it came out of. So they're going under DFAD, and I'm trying to come up with what that even stands for. I mean, I should know this because we're a part of the coalition, but it seems to have just about every progressive organization in it. Again, it's all DFAD.
Okay, so
what does it stand for, Mike? Do you know?
Can you put the connection in the link? That would be great. Joel, great question. We need to know how to plug in with this. If you can put that in the link, that would be great. BRYNN TANNEHILL, did you want to add something here? We're at 60 people. I don't know where everybody comes from. We always want with more people than we start. Go ahead, BRYNN.
So I agree with Alan's assessment that it's probably too late to do it after the recess. That will only affect the 2024 election. The good news is that that's probably that's important as well. But if regardless, the 2022 election is probably gone, which means that if Biden is going to get this done, it has to be with this Congress. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of movement by Sinema or Manchin. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that I'm not hearing or seeing, but it looks pretty grim. And I wanted to finish the recording out here with kind of an admonition for progressives who are forward thinking, which is kind of the conclusion of my book, is that if we do reach that point where democracy is stolen, the number one to pass is they cannot accept the situation, they cannot let it go, and they cannot accept a government that was not elected by the people, for the people, and of the people. That this is a make or break point, that once we accept it, once we move on, once we let that become the new normal, then we become Russia, then we become Hungary or Poland or Turkey. And that is, therein lies the path to madness with this Republican Party that has gone so far down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, anger, and violence that it's going to be directed in ways that are going to make what happened during the first Trump administration seem tame. And that's my parting message for anybody that's watching this, is what we have to do if our worst fears come to pass.
Absolutely. And, all this yapping about white supremacy and what is that? Critical race theory. It's all a diversion. Yelling at Dr. Seuss. What's really happening is that they have lost the culture war, and they're grabbing the reins of government as hard as they possibly can, no matter what the public thinks. Again, we're at 60 people. We're almost out of recording time. Stephen Spitz, do you want to jump in? You haven't spoken.
Yeah. I just wanted to emphasize. I put this in the chat, but August 12th is when the census is going to drop. That legislators in those Republican-controlled states are going to seize that data and try to redistrict as soon as possible thereafter. So just to underline Alan's point, we can't wait until after the recess to do the voting rights stuff.
Absolutely correct. We're at 3:37. Our recording is about to end. This has been the Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition, number 60. Totally, they just get more intense. And BRYNN TANNEHILL, we want to thank you for joining us. Your book, American Fascism, is online. It's a very important summary of what we've been talking about for the last year and a half. We need to find ways to win. The good news is we know what we're up against. I think we've done a great job of inspecting every corner of the fascist assault on American democracy. There are no surprises here. Well, there may be a surprise or two, but you couldn't make up the stuff that happened in Arizona, but we had 3 great people there on the case. And the same is all over the country now. In California, we have built, certainly since 2000 and 2004, the stolen elections of Florida and Ohio. We have a body of knowledge now. Hopefully we have enough people to make the difference. That's what these calls are about. I want to thank Mike Hirsch and Steve Caruso, our engineers, for getting and keeping this all together. Joel Siegel, my co-convener, Charles Moreland. We're going to turn to you in a minute to talk about the events in DC that we really need to pay attention to. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, crew in New York, and we'll see you next week in Solartopia.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from